The ambush. The scanner ping echoed through the bridge of the EF's Defiance, a sound so faint it might have been dismissed as background noise by less attentive ears. Commander Ilara Shaw straightened in her command chair, her steel gray eyes narrowing. "Contact," Lieutenant Ramos announced, his voice barely above a whisper despite the fact that sound couldn't travel through the vacuum separating them from the approaching vessel. Maraxian warship, Dreadnought class. Their signatures matched the invasion fleet that hit Mars colony. Shaw nodded, allowing herself a small smile. The bait had been taken. All ships maintain position, she ordered, her voice calm despite the hammering of her heart. Power systems, at minimum. Let them come to us. Around her, the bridge crew worked in near silence, the tension so thick, Shaw could almost taste it. The Defiance was just one of 50 vessels, hidden in the shadow of Jupiter, invisible to long-range scanners thanks to the gas giant's electromagnetic interference and the experimental cloaking technology developed by Dr. Ayanna Chen. 6 months ago, Earth had learned the hard way about the Maraxian Empire when their first wave had decimated the outer colonies. Mars had fallen in days. The lunar bases shortly after. Earth's unified defense forces had managed to repel the initial assault, but at devastating cost. This ambush was humanity's last, desperate gambit. "Commander," Communications Officer Park called out, "we're picking up transmissions from the Maraxian vessel. They're celebrating." "Let me hear it," Shaw ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life, translating the alien language into English. The harsh, clicking sounds of the Maraxian tongue made Shaw's skin crawl even in translation. "Earth's defenses are broken. Their orbital platforms are crippled. Pathetic creatures. They thought their primitive weapons could stand against the might of the Empire. Supreme Commander Vexkar will be pleased." Shaw's jaw tightened. The Maraxians didn't know about this fleet, assembled in secret from ships that had been under construction when the invasion began. Vessels rushed to completion in hidden facilities throughout the asteroid belt, then brought here to Jupiter's shadow to wait. "Tactical. What's their course?" she demanded. "They're heading directly for the Jupiter-Earth transfer corridor, Commander." "Exactly as predicted. They'll pass within optimal engagement range in 17 minutes. Shaw took a deep breath. "Send the signal to all ships. Prepare to engage on my mark." As the Defiance hummed to life around her, power flowing to weapon systems and engines, Shaw thought about Earth, about her home in the Pacific Northwest, the towering pines and the scent of rain, about her sister and her nieces, about everything humanity stood to lose if this plan failed. The Maraxian dreadnought grew larger on the view screen, its organic-looking hull bristling with weapon emplacements. Behind it, dozens more ships materialized from hyperspace, a fleet large enough to overwhelm Earth's remaining defenses. "They're launching fighter craft," Tactical reported. "Standard invasion pattern." Shaw nodded. "Just as we expected." They're confident. Complacent. She activated the fleet-wide comm. "All ships, this is Commander Shaw. Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Engage." As 150 warships powered up, emerging from Jupiter's shadow like avenging angels. The Maraxian fleet, caught completely by surprise, scrambled to respond. But Shaw's forces had the advantage of position and preparation. "All ships, target their propulsion systems," Shaw ordered. "Cut off their retreat paths. Wolverine squadrons, deploy." Small, agile fighter craft poured from the human vessels, swarming toward the confused Maraxian formation. On the view screen, Shaw watched as energy beams sliced through the void, striking with surgical precision. The bridge erupted in cheers as the first Maraxian cruiser exploded, its reactor core breached by concentrated fire. Direct hit on their flagship's engine array. Tactical called out. "They're leaking plasma." But the Maraxians weren't beaten yet. Their superior technology began to tell as they recovered from their initial surprise. Return fire lanced out, catching one of the human destroyers and shearing it nearly in half. Evasive maneuvers, Shaw ordered as the Defiance shuddered under a glancing blow. Ramos, status of the NOVA device. Lieutenant Ramos worked his console, his dark features illuminated by its glow. No VA is charged and ready, Commander. But we'll need to get closer. Shaw grimaced. The NOVA device was humanity's trump card. An experimental weapon that generated a localized disruption in space-time. In theory, it would temporarily disable all Maraxian technology within its radius. In practice, this would be its first combat test. Helm, bring us in closer to their flagship. All power to forward shields. The Defiance surged forward, engines straining as they pushed through the chaotic battlefield. Energy blasts splashed against their shields, alarms wailing as power reserves dwindled. Shields at 30%. An officer called out. Hold course, Shaw ordered, gripping her chair's armrests. The Maraxian flagship loomed larger in the view screen, its alien design both beautiful and terrifying. A direct hit rocked the Defiance, throwing crew members from their stations. Shields critical. Almost there, Shaw muttered. Then, louder. Deploy NOVA on my mark. The distance closed. 3,000 kilometers. 2,000. 1,000. Now, a pulse of blue-white energy erupted from the Defiance, expanding outward in a perfect sphere. Where it touched Maraxian ships, their lights flickered and died. Weapon systems went dark. Engines failed. Shaw allowed herself a moment of exhilaration as the enemy flagship drifted powerless before them. All ships, concentrate fire on secondary targets. Boarding teams to the flagship. Move. As transport shuttles raced toward the crippled Maraxian vessel, Shaw knew the real battle was just beginning. They needed to capture the enemy commander, needed the intelligence stored in the flagship's computers. But for the first time since the invasion began, Commander Ilara Shaw allowed herself to feel something that had become almost foreign to her. Hope. A new dawn. The Maraxian Supreme Commander Vexkar stood nearly 7 feet tall, his chidnous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights of the Defiance's interrogation room. Despite being restrained, there was no submission in his four-eyed gaze as he stared at Commander Shaw. Your victory is meaningless, he clicked, the translation software rendering his alien speech into flat, emotionless English. Our empire spans 1,000 worlds. This fleet was merely the vanguard. Shaw studied him, trying to read the alien's body language. And yet here you are, Supreme Commander, captured by primitives. The alien's mandibles twitched, the Maraxian equivalent of a dismissive snort. A temporary setback. Even now, our main battle fleet approaches. They will scorch your world to glass. Behind the one-way glass, Dr. Ayanna Chen watched the interrogation with intense concentration. At 32, she was the youngest person ever to head Earth's Advanced Physics Division, her brilliant mind responsible for both the cloaking technology and the NOVA device that had turned the tide of battle. He's lying, she murmured to Captain Miguel Torres, who stood beside her. Look at the way his secondary antennae are flattened against his skull. Their neurology report indicated that's a stress response. Torres nodded. What do you think he's hiding? I don't know yet, Chen admitted, but I've been analyzing the data we pulled from their flagship's computers. There's something strange about their hyperspace calculations, inconsistencies that don't make sense unless... She trailed off, eyes widening as realization struck. Grabbing her tablet, she burst into the interrogation room, interrupting Shaw mid-question. Commander, I need to speak with you immediately. Shaw frowned but followed Chen into the corridor, leaving Vexkar under guard. This better be important, Doctor. It's more than important, Chen said, her words tumbling out in excitement. It's game-changing. The Maraxians aren't from this galaxy. Shaw blinked. What? Their hyperspace calculations include adjustments for intergalactic travel. And look at these power readings. Chen thrust her tablet forward, showing energy consumption graphs. Their ships generate enormous power, but they're using most of it just to maintain stable existence in our spacetime. What are you saying? They're not adapted to our universe, Commander. The physical laws they evolved under must be slightly different from ours. That's why the NOVA device worked so well. It didn't just disrupt their technology. It briefly altered the local spacetime to be even more incompatible with their biology. Shaw's mind raced with the implications. So they're vulnerable. More vulnerable than they've let on. Exactly. And there's more. Chen swiped to another screen. I've pinpointed their entry point into our galaxy. A stable wormhole near the Carina Nebula. If we could collapse it, we could cut off their reinforcements, Shaw finished. But how? The nebula is thousands of light years away. Chen's eyes gleamed. With a modified NOVA device, one powerful enough to create a cascading spacetime rupture. I've already run the simulations. It's possible. For the first time in months, genuine excitement broke through Shaw's carefully maintained composure. Show me everything. 48 hours later, the senior officers of humanity's fleet gathered in the Defiance's Strategic Command Center. The holographic display showed the Carina Nebula, with the wormhole represented as a swirling vortex of light. The plan has 3 phases, Shaw explained, her voice steady with conviction. First, Dr. Chen and her team will modify the NOVA device on our 3 fastest ships. Second, those ships will make a hyperspace jump to the Carina Nebula, while our main fleet engages the remaining Maraxian forces here in the solar system. Third, once in position, they'll trigger the device and collapse the wormhole. Captain Torres frowned. The Maraxians will detect our ships approaching the wormhole. They'll intercept. That's why I'll be leading the mission personally, Shaw replied. We'll need to be creative, adapt on the fly. Commander, Admiral Takeda, the fleet's senior officer, interjected. We can't afford to lose you. Shaw met his gaze unflinchingly. With respect, Admiral, we can't afford to fail. I know these ships better than anyone. I know how to push them to their limits. After a moment, Takeda nodded reluctantly. As the meeting concluded, Chen approached Shaw privately. Commander, there's something I didn't mention in front of the others. The modified NOVA device. It will create a quantum backlash when it detonates. Shaw understood immediately. The ships that deliver it won't make it back. Chen nodded, her expression solemn. It's a one-way trip. I know, Shaw said simply. Then, seeing Chen's surprise, I read between the lines of your report, Doctor. Don't worry. I've already selected volunteers who understand the stakes. 3 days later, as the EFS Defiance prepared to depart with its 2 companion ships, Shaw stood in the observation deck, gazing at the blue-green jewel of Earth visible in the distance. She thought again of her home, of the family she was fighting for. Supreme Commander Vexkar had been right about one thing. The main Maraxian battle fleet had arrived, engaging human forces near Mars' orbit. But thanks to the intelligence gleaned from the captured flagship, Earth's defenders were holding their own, using the Maraxians' biological vulnerabilities against them. Commander, Lieutenant Ramos called from the doorway. We're ready to depart. Shaw nodded, taking one last look at her home planet. Then let's finish this. The journey to the Carina Nebula took 16 days of hyperspace travel, 16 days of tension, preparation, and quiet moments of reflection. Shaw recorded personal messages for her family, as did every member of the volunteer crew. When they finally arrived, the nebula stretched before them, a vast, beautiful cloud of dust and gas illuminated by newborn stars. And at its heart, the wormhole, a shimmering distortion in space that led to the Maraxian home galaxy. Maraxian patrol ships detected, Tactical reported. They'd spotted us. As expected, Shaw replied calmly. Initiate evasion pattern Delta. Begin NOVA warm-up sequence. The 3 human ships darted through the nebula's dust clouds, using the stellar material as cover. But the Maraxians were in pursuit, their weapons fire illuminating the cosmic mists. Commander, we're taking heavy fire. reported Captain Lee from one of the escort vessels. "Shields failing." "Stay the course," Shaw ordered. "We need to get closer to the wormhole." A massive explosion lit up the comm screen as Lee's ship was hit. "We've lost the Intrepid." Shaw gritted her teeth. "Transfer their portion of the NOVA payload to our systems. Continue approach." The Defiance shuddered as enemy fire found its mark. Systems failed across the ship, emergency force fields deploying to contain hull breaches. "Distance to optimal detonation point," Shaw demanded. 8,000 kilometers, Ramos reported, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "But our engines are critically damaged. We won't make it." Shaw's mind raced. "Then, what about the Valiant?" she asked, referring to the remaining escort. "Engines still functional, but heavy damage to their NOVA control systems." Shaw opened a channel. "Captain Rice, this is Commander Shaw. Can you get to the detonation point?" "Affirmative," came the reply, the Valiant's captain's voice steady despite the chaos. "But our triggering mechanism is shot. We can't activate the device." "We'll handle that," Shaw said. "Get into position. We'll use what's left of our systems to initiate the cascade remotely." As the Valiant pushed forward toward the wormhole, Shaw turned to Dr. Chen, who was working frantically at a damaged console. "Can you do it, Doctor? Can you trigger their device from here?" Chen didn't look up from her work. "I think so, but the timing will be crucial, and with our systems damaged." She trailed off, then met Shaw's gaze with determination. "Yes, I can do it." The minutes that followed were a desperate race against time. The Valiant maneuvered into position, while the Defiance's crew worked to establish the remote connection. Maraxian ships closed in from all sides, their weapons battering both human vessels. "Valiant in position," Ramos announced. "Connection established," Chen confirmed, her fingers flying over her console. "Initiating NOVA sequence." On the view screen, the Valiant began to glow with unearthly blue light as the NOVA device powered up. The Maraxian ships, sensing danger, intensified their attack, but it was too late. "Detonation in 3, 2, 1. Chen counted down. The Valiant disappeared in a blinding flash that seemed to bend reality itself. Where the explosion touched the wormhole, space twisted and contorted. The artificial passage between galaxies shuddered, collapsed inward, and then, with a silent flash that outshone the nebulous stars, vanished. The shockwave hit the Defiance seconds later, sending it tumbling through space. Emergency systems failed, gravity disappeared, and darkness engulfed the bridge. When auxiliary power finally came back online minutes later, Shaw pulled herself from the floor to stare at the view screen in awe. Where the wormhole had been, there was now only the natural beauty of the nebula. The Maraxian ships hung motionless in space, their systems completely disabled by the NOVA wave. "We did it," Chen whispered, clutching a broken arm against her chest. "The wormhole is gone." Shaw nodded, allowing herself a moment of quiet triumph before the reality of their situation set in. The Defiance was crippled, stranded thousands of light years from Earth, with no way to communicate their success. "Begin damage assessment," she ordered. "See if we can get comms back online. And prepare the cryopods, just in case." As her crew moved to obey, Shaw gazed out at the nebula, thinking of Earth. Even if they never made it home, they had given humanity a fighting chance. With the wormhole collapsed, no more Maraxian reinforcements would come. Earth's defenders, armed with knowledge of the aliens' weaknesses, could turn the tide. "Commander," Ramos called out suddenly, "I'm detecting an approaching ship. It's one of ours." Shaw spun to face him. "That's impossible. No human ship could have followed us here." "It's broadcasting on our emergency frequency," Ramos insisted. "IFF identifies it as the EFS Prometheus. It's requesting permission to dock and assist." Shaw's mind whirled with questions. The Prometheus had been under construction when she left, an experimental vessel designed to test new FTL technology. "Open a channel," she ordered, hope beginning to bloom in her chest. The face that appeared on the view screen was young, determined, and smiling slightly. "Commander Shaw," said the captain of the Prometheus. "Admiral Takeda sends his compliments. We tracked your jump signature and followed as quickly as we could. The new drive works even better than expected." "The situation at Earth?" Shaw asked urgently. "We've pushed them back, Commander. With what we learned from their captured ships, we've developed countermeasures that are devastating to their forces. And now that you've closed their supply line," the captain's smile widened, "we're winning." As preparations began to transfer the Defiance's crew to the undamaged Prometheus, Shaw found herself again on the observation deck, watching as repair crews worked to salvage what they could from her vessel. Dr. Chen joined her, arm now properly set in a medical brace. "You know what this means, don't you?" she asked quietly. Shaw nodded. "With their wormhole technology and the Prometheus's new drive, we can reach the stars. Really reach them. Not just reach them," Chen corrected. "Protect them. There are other threats out there, other Miraxians, but now we know we can face them. And win." As the Prometheus turned toward home, carrying the heroes of humanity's most desperate hour, Commander Ilara Shaw felt the weight of command lift slightly from her shoulders. They had survived. They had prevailed. And in doing so, they had opened the door to a future brighter than any could have imagined when the shadows of war first fell across Earth. In the vast, star-studded darkness, humanity had taken its first true step into the cosmic community, not as victims or conquerors, but as defenders. Guardians of a fragile, beautiful existence that deserved to be protected at all costs. And that, Shaw reflected as the nebula receded behind them, was a legacy worth fighting for.